So today, Nikos is going to dive into why the most successful people don't wait for a crisis to evolve. They pivot from a position of strength.
Pivot comes down to more than a calculated approach. Pragmatism also has its limits. We're always dealing with partial information. We're never seeing the whole picture. So you have to kind of pivot to your gut, and you have to pivot to your instinct. How much longer am I going to bang my head against the wall to deal with these things? And so when you recognize the deeply rooted issues combined with just feelings that aren't good in general, and how much more is this going to be a time suck, energy suck for me relative to other things that I could be doing or spending my time on, it becomes very, very clear.
All systems go. We're having a good day. All right. So today we're talking about pivots, not as a last resort, but as a strategic superpower. So some of the most successful businesses, careers, and ideas didn't come from sticking to the original plan, right? They came from adapting and sometimes just evolving and making bold moves at the right time. So today, Nikos is going to dive into how he recognized when it was time to pivot and how to make the shift with confidence, and why the most successful people don't wait for a crisis to evolve. They pivot from a position of strength. So Nix, we were talking about how you went through this major change over the holidays. Take us through your transformation. What changed?
Yeah,
Tell us all
absolutely.
about this pivot.
I love this. I love this. And thank you for indulging me. And I feel like this is, inevitably going to be partially like a coaching session too, as we always spend some wonderful time together as such. So first, some table setting. I believe most of our audience knows kind of what we're about. Founders being founders, entrepreneurs being entrepreneurs, me being like the techie AI guy. I went from working full time at Domo, and that was the last innovation lab, AI innovation lab that I had built. And I got a nice silver parachute. I was essentially nudged out of the organization for political reasons. And they were very, very welcome because at the time I wanted to do my own gig full time, which is exactly what I did with Dialin. And so for the majority of 2024, it was about Dialin. It was about the mission for data sovereignty, data ethics, and having people essentially manage, control, and own their own data, the connections to their own data, and going to market with that. We had already been in the very deep phases of production, and we're at a point where we needed to raise money. So that was my year, 2024. So that was the first pivot. So the major pivot was I'm jumping out of this parachute. Here we go, betting on myself and my co-founding team, and we're just going to see it through for 2024. And 2024 was very interesting because I hadn't done this full time since I'd say around 2007 to 2010 or so with digital ad tech and being an early founding team there. Had that acquisition and that was good, but then had to get back in the corporate world, essentially doing my thing in running AI innovation labs. So it was very interesting to do that and just do it full time, right? And so it was time to get the product into the app store and start raising some money and talking to VCs in Silicon Valley and just really getting in the trenches of what this thing is. Now, as we were doing that, there were very interesting things that started to happen throughout the course of the year. And one was the very typical one is to expect to get, kicked in the teeth a little bit as an entrepreneur. So dealing with some challenges from, getting the right features into market or a lack of adoption with certain metrics or not getting the resonance that you need in terms of like, VCs and angels going, hell yeah, like, let's do this. I want to partner. I want to jump on. And there were a lot of other things going on at the same time. Me getting pulled into these brain trusts with the X Prize Foundation and diplomatic courier. So now starting to work with government organizations, NGOs, and seeing kind of the broader aperture for building technology responsibly. And so, with the premise that we had, we thought we were firing on all cylinders. The world needs this. The world needs a new internet, especially in the age of
Mm.
AI. We need better data sovereignty, better data ethics and management, better storage, all of these things. But when you look at the hard facts about tactically what was resonating in market, you couldn't get away from the fact of understanding product market fit and the resistance of adoption and product market fit due to some data driven scenarios. And I've always been pragmatic, I've always been data driven. And for some reason, it just wasn't gelling. And we started to get some feedback from investors, from people that were using the product. And it came down to, I'd say, a handful of things in which we needed to either broaden the aperture in which we were working or look at things a little bit more closely with how we execute. So those two things are very critical. And so for the first, it was complexity in the product, right? It's, gosh, this thing does so much. It's amazing. It's an everything app, right? And the way that we were talking about it, hey, we were using it really, really amazing. But then when we would get, a beta with like a dozen people and then 50 people and then 80 people, there was just, we were hitting walls with onboarding just because it does absolutely everything. And we didn't really nail the thing that it was supposed to do, which is, hey, let's incentivize people to get all of their data into one place so that they could manage it amidst all of the different apps that are immediately out there today, from the big moats that we have at Google, Meta, Insta, Snap, TikTok, you name it. And so a critical piece of a lot of the VCs that were saying we were saying, hey, we're a personal cloud storage company, right? And the VCs were looking at it like, well, on your competitive slide, you're competing with TikTok, Google, Meta, Apple, and Snap, and all of the rest of like the absolutely big tech companies that have essentially created the deepest moats within the social media space. Yet we were functioning as a personal cloud and storage company. But the functionality was like they couldn't get through the perspective that the adoption curves are going to be like way too steep because of all of the moats that everybody had already built. And the user experience feels very much like a social media platform. And of course, at some level, we don't want to touch social media. We don't want to touch content moderation and Section 230 and like all of those things that Facebook has kind of been getting kicked around in the teeth for so long. So that was major feedback that we needed to implement. And I was ready to implement that feedback. So all of the things that are external, and I'll differentiate the external with the internal. And when I say internal, I mean co-founding alignment, right? And so the external things are fine. Like, hey, let's take that feedback. Let's move on. Let's overcome these obstacles. Let's shift. Let's build this into the product. Let's adjust. Let's, make change. Where we ran into issues were, how to get to the next phase of this thing. And so we've talked about this on the show before.
So when you say
The,
this thing, you're referring to the product, where the product was at that point.
where the product was at the point, and then where the company is at the point
Okay.
as well. And
Okay.
so with that, the big headline, the TLDR is I had challenges raising money and challenges for people, cutting us checks. And I was wondering why that was. And it was, they were saying things about the product, but then when it came time to execute and deliver and, actually do the things, I started to notice a few things where my co-founders and I started to become somewhat misaligned. And that was the approach in which we were going to market, the approach in which we were building the business. And then it started to cascade into different things operationally, to the degree in which we found some pretty interesting and deep, for lack of a better term, the need to create, kind of a semblance with how we were operating as a company, because now we were starting to diverge. So it's one thing when you say, all right, here's what we need to do. There's a ton of challenges. But then when you have a difference and a divergence with how you're operating and how to get there, that's when you're kind of sowing the seeds for things that are a little bit more problematic. So again, separating the external challenges from the internal challenges.
No,
External challenges were fine.
so
Yep.
when you say a difference in approach, are you
Mhm.
referring to the vision or you're referring to actual operational execution?
Operational execution. Now, this is
Yeah.
a very key thing. So, and I'll say East meets West, and so this is a very important factor we talk about a lot in the show. So, my approach tends to be, let's call it, for oversimplification purposes, my approach tends to be Silicon Valley Western, kind of the Silicon Valley playbook of get to PMF early, deploy in market early, get there super fast, fail fast, execute, pivot if you need to, and then that's where you get the market feedback. So you get the information by movement, by actual movement. Would you agree
Evident.
that that's evidence? So data driven evidence, get to market fast,
Yeah.
kind of run through walls, right?
Yeah.
And if you would agree that that's pretty much kind of the typical startup playbook fashion, that's kind of how it is. So with my co-founder, he was incredibly valuable at bringing vision, brilliance, broadening the aperture in a very creative way to the product, but then adding an X factor dimension to it, which is, everything is going to come to us. And if for those of you that have read, I would highly recommend this book called The Surrender Experiment by Michael Singer. It's
Michael's
excellent. It's a very, very quick read.
phenomenal
And
book.
it's about how a software entrepreneur and, part shamatha guru meditated his way to creating $1 billion company through the act of surrender, meaning the lack of movement, not moving and just staying still.
Yeah.
And
In
so
my
this is
top
where it
5 books of all time.
100%,
Yeah.
100%. And so we started to find ourselves in this interesting dilemma in which we had an Eastern philosophy of, hey, we don't need to do anything. We're better than this. Let's stand still. The money's going to come to us. This is the way we need to operate. We operate as artists in the studio. And then you have me coming in like, no, we got to run through walls. We got to make some calls. We got to do this externally. We have to basically do everything that is in the Silicon Valley playbook. And so there's the best of both worlds. And I'll just say that we couldn't find the harmony in which we needed to execute that, right? And all in all, and I'd love your opinion on this because I'd like to know if there are case studies in which co-CEOs are working. So I took the helm as CEO, yet there was a lot of pushback and resistance internally in the way that I executed because of the divergence in philosophies and business practice, right? And so when you're dealing with things externally, again, I'd rather get my teeth kicked in internally first, but as long as we're aligned and we go out there, then all right, like all systems go. But if you're constantly finding resistance with your co-founding team and there's a divergence in the way that you operate and you're running two separate offenses, we know that misalignment just leads to, not being able to take the ball to the touchdown line, right? The finish line, or nailing that three when you absolutely need it to be done. So that's essentially what happened. And when I noticed the misalignment, we had a very real conversation, among the three of us, and we were like, look, this isn't working. The co-CEO thing isn't working for me. And at the same time, other pieces of the puzzle started to crystallize for me. It's like I feel like I'm getting pulled in, so many different directions. And ultimately this misalignment isn't working. I want to stay pot committed. I'm not trying to get bought out or anything. I still 100% believe in the mission, the vision, and what Dialin can bring to the world. But I need to step down as CEO and give, the helm back to the chairman and the initial founder, who I respect and love very much. And we're still, totally cool to this day. I mean, like I'm meeting, with them, this week to talk strategy. Right. So it's a pivot in a sense that, I needed to work on, things that now I saw like a broader opportunity for, which is AI. I wanted to address, some of those things that the venture capitalists in Silicon Valley and the angels were saying, hey, if you address these things, we can absolutely make this work. So we're actually like doing much better now as a whole, now that we're seeing a lot of the signals. We have pivot points. So there's the dial-in pivot, and then there's my pivot. My pivot is, how I've been operating for the last decade or so. is running AI R&D labs for blue chip companies. I did it for rocket fuel. I did it for seismic. I did it for the transition from seismic to Amazon and being and running kind of the AI Institute and Innovation Lab for these big tech companies, especially when things got more complex with digital transformation, things like GDPR. So, like, as the entire market moved into this AI space, I've been there for the whole ride, working with engineers, data science teams, leading product and engineering teams, and things like that. So I've kind of cut my teeth in this very small niche. I wouldn't say like I'm at the seat of the table with like Mark Andreessen and Sam Altman and like those guys, but
Not yet.
still not still in Silicon Valley. Yes, absolutely. Seat at the table, and and really like looking at this from the perspective of, well, what if I were to stand up my own innovation lab? And I did this for Domo as well, but it wasn't crystallized. I've been operating as kind of an AI agency with numerous consulting companies since 2019, and that was bringing in some nice revenue just with respect to companies were asking me to build full stack AI platforms on their behalf. And these were big brands, big companies, right? And so there's complexity in managing what that looks like. There's complexity in managing and working with their existing data science teams. And then a whole big piece of this was around education. Like, how do I actually operationalize this? A lot of this becomes change management. A lot of this becomes, let's get in the weeds. But then from a strategy perspective, it needs to be a commercialization initiative as well. So I haven't met many people that can cover the full spectrum of going deep at the code level and the infrastructure and architecture level with engineers and data scientists, but then also take it all the way through to commercialization. This is product market fit. This is how you get things out. This is how you drive awareness and demand for these specific software products. So I was like, wow, I've been operating this way. And I basically need to take that and crystallize that and basically take my company operations, my company, my LLC, Neoverse, the one that I've been operating more as just kind of my holding company. I just need to rebrand that, take all of the assets, pull that into this new entity called Ion Labs, and Ion Labs is now like me. I 100% own it. It's me as an AI researcher. I get to kind of scratch that itch as both an AI researcher, somebody that commercializes these products in development, and then also functions as an artist. Like, there's a whole new realm of and a world of possibility with indulging in creative technologies. And the go to market now is I'm seeing a broad periphery and entering spaces that I haven't touched for decades. Hollywood is getting fully disrupted, and there's like a ton of opportunity there. The finance space is getting disrupted with blockchain. And so now this allows me to operate in multiple silos. And the way that I'm set up is I have 50 ML engineers and a dozen PhDs. What can we build in this future? How can we ride the wave while this new explosion is happening? And the resources, the skill sets that I have, and I don't know if you agree with this. I'd love to dive into how you're feeling about this AI explosion, but I haven't seen anything like this since 1997, literally when the web just first came out. And this is when I first learned how to code. And I'm wondering if you also feel the same kind of explosion with AI, in that I haven't seen anything like this since 1997. And I had nothing compared to the skill set that I have now and the resources that I have right now. So it feels like a very significant level up. And I know this because October, I experienced a dark night of the soul. I was like, where am I going with this? We're not able to get anybody to invest in us. My co-founder was off in India doing his thing with launching an innovation lab there when I wanted to launch things here. And so it was just a really dark night for myself. And then when things started to really like alchemize was around Thanksgiving. And all of a sudden I couldn't stop getting phone calls around people just asking me to build AI platforms on their behalf, be part fractional CTO, be like invest in their ventures. And I'm like, wow, this is actually pretty cool. I'm operating kind of like a hybrid AI agency, venture studio, a research lab, and I have all of these resources at my disposal. Like, we're going to crush it with this new model. And I can stay opportunity stacking even if I'm getting pulled in all different directions, because now all of the value, all of the IP, the things that we build just inherently continues to build this new foundation, this new infrastructure for AI skills. And ultimately, the value becomes very, very clear. How can we prepare people, organizations, individuals for the age of superintelligence as it's coming upon us? And very few people can actually enable the world to do this. And so there's part of it is, purpose and calling and all of that woo woo stuff. And then a part of it is just like purely pragmatic from like a business perspective. This just makes sense for me to operate this way. So I know I said a lot. I basically like threw up on you this morning. Thank you for giving me the space to talk about this in a tirade. But yeah, would love to dive into what you want around pivoting.
Hey there. We're taking a quick break from the show to let you know that if you'd like to invite Dialin or Nikos to speak at your next event on topics ranging from emergence and the inner game to the future of AI, we've got you covered. Simply email us at info@emergencenowpod.com. Once again, that's info@emergencenowpod.com. Now, let's dive back to the show.
Yeah. So what I want to dive into, you said something really interesting, and I think our listeners would benefit from this whole notion of, and I think the first time you shared this with me 3 weeks ago, the one thing that stuck to me was this whole notion of, we don't need to do anything. The money is going to come to us. And, if I could say, this is delusional founder syndrome. The idea that if you just build it, they will come. Yes, that's worked for a few startups, but great tech doesn't sell itself. Even Steve Jobs had to market the hell out of the iPhone, right? So if one side thinks they're the artist and the other side thinks that they're the operator, the real issue isn't execution. It's a fundamental disagreement on what business you're actually in.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And there are aspects of this mission that bode very well for a spiritual retreat, a new manifesto for how to live your life. Call it the 112 meditations for the digital world, the surrender experiment for a new outlook. All of those things, the lessons that I've learned in working with this very special co-founding team have been tremendously valuable in all other aspects of my life, just with respect to leveling up my mindset, my inner growth. All of the things that we talk about on this show
Yeah.
caused me to experience an emergence of sorts, right? However, I needed to be very judicious about how I applied those principles into business. And that's where things got a little bit tricky, is that it became a little bit convoluted when you're starting to mix and match practices of spirituality with the operationalization of a platform. And there are things that go hand in hand with it in terms of like my own spiritual growth and things like that, which we do talk about and I'm constantly indulging in. But then there are aspects of where you just need to, like you said, execute and go.
Yeah. And another thing that you shared that really resonates is this whole notion of, or the idea of co-CEOs. I mean, you asked about case studies. I think they almost never work. And even when they do, it's because one is actually the CEO.
Right.
So I think the
Yeah.
closest example that we'll find of this is Salesforce. Remember,
hmm
Benioff had a co-CEO. I forget his name. I think it was Block. And also Netflix.
Yeah.
Hastings had a co-CEO. I forget his name. But even those were temporary.
Totally.
Most of the time, I mean, when I think of co-CEOs, BlackBerry had a co-CEO set up
hmm
as well.
Right.
And remember what happened to BlackBerry. Most
Oh,
of the time,
100%.
co-CEOs, I find, are a polite way of saying, you know what, we can't really agree on who's actually in charge.
I agree with that. The only time I've seen it work firsthand is with a company that had a very successful exit called Zeus.com, which was a dating app back. I forget when they exited. It was like 2011, 2012. But Alex and Cheyenne, who were friends of mine, back in the day, they actually were co-CEOs, but this is where it was just a title, right? Because I know Alex was more of like the engineer. He was more like the product engineering guy.
Yeah.
And Cheyenne was more operations. So it's like, okay, well, that actually, the
So
title is co-CEO, but you guys are operating in a very different way, right?
it's more like COO, CEO.
That's right. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right.
And oftentimes that's actually the setup. Like I remember
Yeah,
when I was running Latitude Systems, my first company, my partner and I, Avi and I, we couldn't decide who was going to be CEO,
yeah,
right? Because we were both founders.
yeah.
So we started off with the co-CEO position. Were both co-CEOs, and then we quickly decided that that wasn't going to work,
Hmm.
and we took on different roles in the company.
Yeah,
We didn't have a CEO. We didn't
right,
need to,
right,
right? We
right.
didn't want to get lost in the title.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, there's just so much to do at the early stages that you're going to blend and blur some lines. But at some point, you need to decide on those swim lanes, right? Or else you're just going to keep butting heads in market. And when you're in the trenches, that's the last thing you want to do is be doing that with your foxhole buddy, right?
And also to say that, to say that I stepped down as CEO, but I'm still all in. I
Oh,
mean,
yeah.
that's really, really rare. And most founders either leave completely or stay and create tension, right? So the
Oh,
fact that you
totally.
still believe in the vision, but no,
100%.
you weren't the right CEO is a huge self-awareness flex.
Oh yeah. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
setting up
Yeah.
investor calls like next week. I mean, I'm not stopping. We're going to go pitch to 300 CMOs and investors in New York at a Martech conference in March. So I mean, like I'm busier than ever. So 100% supportive, just not taking the helm so that it's like, okay, we're going to do this your way. I may disagree with you. I'll disagree with you here, but we're all in this together out there. That's also a very clear message, right?
Yeah. Do you regret not stepping down sooner? Or do you think you stayed just long enough to give it a fair shot?
I'd say the latter, just because I still had runway. I gave myself 18 months and I still had, plenty of gas in the tank. I would have done it, but it was to the degree in which I was spinning my wheels and my awareness was super high on it that I knew it needed to turn faster. Because why continue the burn if it's going to impede on other opportunities that I've been turning down all year? And at some level, I hate to say this, but money talks. Like it
Yeah.
was an opportunity cost in terms of contracts, revenues, things that I was not paying attention to, or simply just said I was turning down business all year long, right? So that became consequential to like the opportunity cost of the time that I wasn't spending in other places, and that became more of the urgent, immediate need, right?
You're talking about Surrender, the Surrender Experiment. It's a great book, and we'll put it in the show notes. And I'm listening to you, and I feel like, and tell me if this resonates. You're mixing surrender with startup hustle, and those don't really blend easily because one mindset says, you know what, trust the process, let things unfold. The other says, well, you know what? Let's run through walls. Let's hustle. Let's execute. They both work, but not at the same time and not in the same business. So if you're trying to force alignment between two opposing forces instead of picking a lane, as you said, there's going to be in certain decisions you're going to have impasse. And with startups, I mean, you have to execute and make decisions, in real time. You can't deflect, defer those decisions that need to be made to keep moving the business forward.
Yes, 100%. And and yes, the surrender experiment was 100% being applied, and I can't say I have all the answers, right? I'm still figuring all of this out. I can't say, "Oh, I've found perfect harmony between Eastern and Western philosophies and how to do business and how to achieve this in my personal life." No, I am still 100% a work in progress, and I come to our audience and you with great humility and gratitude for where I am, and I will continue to operate as such. So I haven't figured it out, but what was interesting that was happening is the surrender was taking place, the law of attraction was taking place, but it was happening outside of the way that I was operating in Dialin. So all of these other opportunities were happening like almost like a waterfall, but they were coming outside of this entity that was, where I was kind of stuck. So I was like, do I continue to ignore what's happening over here when it's clearly just kind of landing on my lap? How much longer can I ignore those opportunities until they become significant? So yeah, that's kind of what happened.
So you've been in AI for years now. Do you think you're now in the position where you can take advantage of the full spectrum of your experience, your creativity, your I guess are you in a position now to really capture that wave that is AI, which you've been in the thick of since AI was even a thing?
This is a huge one, right? I feel like I don't know if it was whimsy or novel. It was something that I was interested in, I could say as far back as 2005 when I first read Ray Kurzweil's book The Singularity is Near. And I read it more as two parts. I read it as a wild futurist take on what could be and what humanity could become. But then I also looked at it as probably the most wicked scientific research paper I've ever read. Like, and it is like a legit, like 600-page scientific research paper on Moore's law and exponential change. And he's data driven in terms of measuring the change. These are all very, very quantifiable things to the degree in which he was like making these predictions of, well, AI is going to pass the Turing test at 2030. We're going to reach super intelligence by 2045. And now it looks like we're going to smash through all of those predictions. We're probably on our way to AGI by 2027, if not maybe 2030, right? And so I was interested in it from this nerdy sci-fi kid, Star Wars sci-fi kid, just like interested in technology and geeking out on all of this stuff, then got into the startup space. And then it just kind of wrapped and became this whole cascading thing in Silicon Valley. It was hard to get out of. Yeah, I was super early and was working on it super early. Kinsey was doing it before it was cool. And this was, working in it as early as like 2010. And now, yes, it's like, okay, well, I'm in this position. I'm still trying to figure out like how to bring it all together. But it's like there are very few people that can speak to it, understand the trends, understand how to apply it, while also being kind of a core practitioner and working with these tools and interacting like completely baked into my workflow. And the reason why I'm set up the way that I am and can achieve all of this is because I have a great team that's behind me, people that are much smarter than me at, doing the engineering while I maintain kind of the architecture and the vision perspective. But I'll apply the Elon methodology where I'll go into the room with them applying first principles, like, and these are engineering challenges and they're very weedy at the code level where we'll need to break through all of those challenges. And that is the responsibility of the founder and the CEO. It's like, give me the absolute hairiest, ugliest, dirtiest challenges that we have, and we will work on those this week. And we will break through those barriers this week. And when things are running smoothly, I kind of don't really need to be involved. So involve me when the problems are there. So I've applied some of the Elon principles to that level. But yes, to answer your question, I feel like that's a perfect time to be in AI because it's still early, right? Very, very
Yeah.
early.
Yeah, when I think of AI, I think of we were in the valley in 99, 2000 during the dot-com,
Boom and bust.
boom and bust. And during that boom and bust, I mean, the best programmers didn't win. It wasn't the
Hmm.
programmers that won. It was the business minds who
The
understood
vision.
distribution and
Yeah,
had the vision, and they captured 90% of the value. And
that's
and I
right.
feel like today the same thing is happening. I mean, you don't have
Hmm.
to be the best coder. You just have to
Hmm.
be the best at turning AI into, a valuable product for the right
Yeah,
people.
that's right.
So, are you playing the builder game or are you playing the business game? What game are you playing now?
A little bit of both. So
Because
that's the luxury.
you were playing both. Are you still
Yeah.
playing both?
Well, that's the luxury I have right now is because the way that I'm set up is AI research, design, and innovation. So the research portion like really looking and evaluating what's best in class in terms of diffusion models, computer vision, multimodal, like just following and building our own stuff internally, launching DeepSeek. We're about to essentially launch and implement DeepSeek R1 today, actually. So testing these out ourselves, loading up on GPUs and H100s to the degree that I could afford them and put them on my Amex, right? And not have to fork out $50 million. But apparently, if DeepSeek is doing it with, for six, there's these scaling laws that are completely
Allegedly.
being allegedly, yeah, they're
Yeah.
being crushed right now. So we could talk about news if you want. So that's the research side, right? So core research, also evaluating trends. Like there's one paper that we just dropped recently called "The Path to AGI." We'll drop that in the link too. We just dropped "The Path to AGI," written, co-created with OpenAI's deep research. So still doing that, broadening the aperture of things that are interesting to me, research projects that are interesting to me, like the intersections of cognitive architecture, the nature of reality, and how AI plays into that, like how we render things in reality just with respect to space-time and all of those things. And then application, right? The application layer is very important because I don't have $200 million table stakes to put at a foundation model, nor do I really want to build AI infrastructure. That's not super interesting to me. So on the layer up is the application layer. And at the application layer, even if you're building AI wrappers, what is the business? How do you sell this thing in? What's your go to market? How do you crystallize this thing into a way that's going to be meaningful for you? Are you going to build a chat bot? Or are you just going to create cool shit? You could bleep that out. This is a family friendly show. But I still want to push the boundaries on diffusion models. Like I'm going to make the call that we're going to see the first full feature film generated by AI by the end of this year, if not sooner. And what is that going to look like? It's just going to unlock creativity, right? So just creating cool art that I did not have time for, just with respect to, okay, well, you got to be an artist if you're, and I am being an artist. It's like, wow, this is unlocking a level of creativity in me that I haven't known possible. So now I can elevate the game. This isn't about creating, cool puppy dogs with sunglasses, via like a, paragraph long prompt. How could that process, while people are kind of denigrating it, oh yeah, well, you just wrote a prompt into Midjourney, that's not art. I would argue that it is art to a lot of people that have tapped into this new layer of creativity that they can now indulge in and explore for themselves. So it's just going to unlock so many different things. And so
Yeah.
the nice semblance at the application layer where business needs to meet vision, needs to meet go to market is really the space to play right now if you don't want to build a foundation model.
I want to just round out the first part of the conversation here, right? So you were talking about pivot. What was the biggest, and then we'll come back to the biggest opportunities in AI right now. You just said that there's a lot of things that are getting ready to unlock. But let's go back to the pivot. What would you say was the biggest lesson for you in recognizing the pivot? Number one. Number two, for someone who's listening to the show and wondering, should I be pivoting? Like what are the signals to
Well,
recognize that, what, it's time for a pivot?
pivot comes down to more than a calculated approach. Pragmatism also has its limits because the mind and the brain have its limits. We're always dealing with partial information. We're never seeing the whole picture, right? Because we just can't comprehend. Even when we're looking at Donald Hoffman style, you're looking at space time, like all of the pixels that we're seeing in space time. That's not really what we're seeing. So everything is partial information. So you have to kind of pivot to your gut and you have to pivot to your instinct. So the nebulous things about intuition start to come
Yeah.
into play. And then it becomes a feeling, right? And it becomes a feeling of, well, how much longer am I going to bang my head against the wall to deal with these things? And what kind of issues are we facing? Are these downstream externalities of reactions or things that aren't resonating with our premise or our thesis or product market fit? Or are these things upstream and fundamental? And so when you recognize the deeply rooted issues combined with just feelings that aren't good in general, and how much more is this going to be a time suck, energy suck for me? relative to other things that I could be doing or spending my time on, it becomes very, very clear. So the culmination of those things caused me to make a decision that was kind of hard, but also just made sense at the time.
Mm. Why was it hard?
Because I don't like to give up, because I like to run through walls, because I'm an entrepreneur,
Uh,
because of
but
all of
why
the things. Yeah.
why are you conflating the pivot to giving up?
Well, yes, we've talked about this before, and the only time it's really failure is when you do like abandon it and give up. And so it is a pivot. You're absolutely right. But a part of me liked the idea of being at the helm. So maybe it was more, and that was another thing, is that like I realized that I no longer bring ego to the table, because a part of me still liked being CEO. I liked the aspect of, being at the helm and kind of making the decisions and doing things and being the core foundational operator, right? Even though when we were working with kind of a dual CEO capacity, it was hard because the feelings were rough to a time when we were just constantly like butting heads, and I wanted to continue, and I didn't want to ultimately let it go. But letting go of things are hard sometimes, right?
Yeah, and I think that's where the surrender experiment, that aspect of it, really opens up, a new level of understanding and awareness that there are certain things that we need to accept and pivot because there's a bigger opportunity that is on the horizon,
Right.
and being able to recognize that, I think, is key.
Absolutely. And
Yeah,
now I get the best of both worlds, because
yeah,
I still get to be in for the ride. I'm still pot committed all the way through. And timing was another thing too, right? So it's like we were early for everything that we were saying. But now imagine an internet where you can't trust anything that you see. What if everything is just going to be created by AI in this internet? And what is the verification mechanism in order to finally do that? And people are going to abandon the internet if they just can't trust it completely, or it's going to set a new premise and expectation that, hey, nothing that I'm seeing now is real. We're in complete reality distortion mode. Let's go
yeah,
to this other place where I know people are there and there are things that I actually want. That's where
yeah,
dials are actually going to do their thing. It's like you need dials for LLMs. I mean, you're going to live in a world where it's personal LLMs. I don't want my data to go into DeepSeek. I don't want my data to go into TikTok. I
yeah,
don't want my data to go to these different places. My data is here, but now I have toggles and dials for every single one of those things. So of course I'm going to believe in this vision. Like
yeah,
I'm 120. I'm even more highly convicted now of the vision of Dialin right now. It just
yeah.
shifts the role that I'm playing. So the relationship that I have with it just changes a little bit.
Beautiful. Very clear. So I want to pivot, no pun intended. You're talking about some of the opportunities that are on the horizon, right? From an AI perspective. So right now, most people are focused on, AI agents replacing jobs, chatbots, automation, virtual assistants, all of that. And then you've got the AI improving creativity, right? All the Gen AI stuff for text, video, images, all of that. And then you have the third pillar, which is AI supercharging productivity, right? So we're hearing more about agents and workflow automation, all valid. Well, what do you think is being ignored right now? Like, what is the big opportunity that people are ignoring? So, for an entrepreneur listening to this who's interested in getting involved in AI, what's the one area do you think that they can focus on?
I'm going to flip this a little bit,
Flip
because
it.
I've gone through this exercise and it was a painful one, because I'm like kid in a candy store, squirrel, squirrel, squirrel. Like everything is a good opportunity, chasing after everything, where I needed to be more like you, like an essentialist. What am I going to say no to? And so it was a very hard exercise to look at niches where people aren't playing right now, especially if you're seeing the number of tools that are coming out on a day to day basis, which I am tracking. And it's thousands a day. It's easier than ever to launch a startup software product. So I've I've tried to carve out niches where people are just like not addressing very specific use cases, and that there are edge cases. There are edge cases that are, really, really hard, like in terms of like doing your own vectorization, doing your own knowledge graphs, from the very, very nerdy to kind of like the atypical, how do I create my own AI automation agency and be a solopreneur, right? All of it. Like I'm exploring like all of it. The pivot in the age of AI is no longer about differentiation to me, because you're not going to differentiate. Whatever idea that you have, I guarantee you somebody else has already like come up with it, right? So stop trying to be the one of one and constantly trying to optimize, because I've burned so many hours on trying to optimize on differentiation. So now I'm just going to do what I love. So for an entrepreneur that's trying to get into the space, just do what you love and find a way for AI to operationalize that. That's it. That's it. I'm only going to do what I love.
That's the mic drop moment right there. I have another angle to this.
Okay.
So if it's 1997, right? Well, what do you think is the equivalent of launching Google right now, right? So if you look at Google's Playbook in 97 or 98, whenever that was, the internet was messy. You had information out there, but finding what you needed was really inefficient. So Google didn't really create new content; it just organized existing content, right? So it won through superior, I guess, usability and scalability. But what's the AI equivalent of that today? Like, AI today is super messy, 1,000 tools every day. I mean, that's just bananas, right? So, I mean, we have models, we have AIs, you have all these automation tools, but what's the Google equivalent?
That's funny, because
How
coming
do we?
full circle, I
How
don't
do
know
we?
if you purposefully, go ahead.
Oh
I'll let
yeah.
you finish the question.
No, I was just gonna say. So whoever
Yeah.
how can we organize the AI ecosystem? I mean, that's essentially what Google did for information on the
Absolutely.
internet. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, I mean, I don't know if you softball this for me, but come full circle, the answer is a version of Dialin, which is it becomes less about what those foundation models are doing within their ecosystem to
Yeah.
organize things for themselves, because the ad model is broken. Now that premise is louder and clearer than before. It needs to be about you, because you're the one maintaining integrity over your own data. And
Mm.
so when collective intelligence starts to play in, it's these dials that are going to create a new relational model with everything around you. So it's not about how a company can surface that information to me because it's come up on a keyword phrase, and because you have a lot of different companies bidding on whether I want your eyeballs to click on my thing, and it's basically positioning that solution for you because you searched for it. It's like, no, I just wanted some information. So in a world of LLMs, that's going to be one piece, but then the data layer, the semantic layer, what creates meaning for me as a user, is going to be a version of Dialin that we're calling a personal language model, where your dials could feed into that language model to make it just for you. It's personalized just for you, not some generic regurgitation of what it's been fed via the internet. It's not based on anything in the past. It's not based on all of these queries and what is being jammed through it as a system. It's based on your real time rendering of how you are feeling in this moment, how you're perceiving in this moment, and that premise is becoming much stronger than ever. So yeah, thanks for the softball.
You're welcome. All right, Nix, this was very enlightening for me to listen to you and your journey. I feel like this was an MBA on how to pivot, and at the same time, there are a lot of lessons around self-awareness. So you brought the business, pragmatic side along with the more philosophical and just being really authentic um, to yourself and where you are in your journey. So thank you for sharing that. That was amazing. And I hope all of you enjoyed the show. We'll catch you next week.
Thank you for tuning in to Emergence Now, where we explore the emerging trends, technologies, and ideas that are shaping our world today for you to discover yourself. We hope you enjoyed this episode and gained valuable insights that you can apply in your own life. If you want to stay up to date with our latest episodes, be sure to subscribe to our podcast on your favorite platform. And don't forget to follow us on social media, where we share additional content, engage with our community, and keep the conversation going. Thanks again for listening to Emergence Now, and we hope you'll join us for the next episode.